Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today we are going to be sewing this pattern 3744 by Simplicity. This is from the early 1950s. As you can see, it's super worn. It has this little sticker on the back or stamp that says it's from Macy's and it was purchased on October 1st, 1952. And this was a pattern that had so many pieces. It looks really simple from the illustration, but there were a lot of pieces and most of them needed to be cut on the fold of the fabric. So I didn't know if I was going to have enough fabric, but I did. The only thing was that instead of cutting the back piece of the pattern on the fold, I had to cut it on its own, as you see there, and I cut a little extra seam allowance in there and sewed it together, which ended up working out really well. It was just really frustrating that all of the pieces were cut on the fold pieces, and I also had to make my own bias tape for this pattern because I was using the patterned fabric. I wanted it to match. So here I am marking off all of the darts and pleats. There were 2 pleats in the skirt, and then of course the bodice had all of the darts in it, and I pinned them together. I always start by sewing the darts, but because I had to make that back seam, I did that first just to make sure everything was connected. And I did all French seams for this pattern. That's pretty standard for me lately. I want to make things that are really durable and can be washed without having to worry about the fabric unraveling. And I feel like using pinking shears to pink the edges just really isn't enough most of the time to keep the fabric together long term. So I did that first, and then I sewed all of the darts on the bodice. I usually don't have an issue sewing darts. They're actually one of my favorite things to do because they're nice and easy and quick. But for some reason, I felt like the darts were fighting me on this project. I don't know if that's just me, but that's how I felt. And here I'm sewing the shoulder seams and the side seams, of course still using all French seams. And then I did the facing for the neckline. I actually really liked this about this pattern. It made the neckline nice and crisp and clean. And I'll show you in a moment how I finished the other raw edge of the facing. This was probably one of the more difficult parts of this pattern just because you have to make sure that everything is lined up exactly because the neckline is really something that you don't want to mess up. So there was like a lot of stop and go and rotating because there's all of those angles in the neckline. So this took quite a bit of time to finish, but I did get it down in the end and it came out really good. After I was done sewing the facing and flipping it to the inside, I did a quick stitch around the edge of the neckline, and I made sure to do that really close just so the neckline laid really flat and was nice and crisp. I usually do that when patterns have this type of facing on the neck or any other part of the pattern, just so it lays flat in the end. And to finish that raw edge off, as I said before, I just folded it under on the inside and stitched it so there was a nice little border in this brown thread I'm using that I thought went really well with this fabric and the color scheme. I just went around the neckline and quickly just went really close to the edge and tucked it under just to finish it off. I really don't like leaving raw edges of anything or any kind of things like flapping around on the inside of dresses. So then to finish off the armholes, I used that bias tape that I made earlier and went around, sewed it to the inside first, and then rolled it over onto the outside as you see me sewing here. And just went ahead and also stitched that really close to the edge. making sure that I was getting it nice and straight and even, and making sure that it connected nicely and the fold over was in a spot where you wouldn't really see it. So I did it under the arms. And yeah, this was probably the most satisfying part of this pattern because it was actually really quick to finish the bodice, and I thought it came out looking really nice. Everything, as you see here, came out just the way I wanted it. And yeah, so then I moved on and I started on all of the French seams for the skirt. This skirt was so many pieces, and I thought it was going to be a lot bigger or more voluminous than it came out just because of how many pieces there were to this, but it actually isn't that voluminous, and I think part of that has to do with the pleats in the front of the skirt, but it ended up being just enough to give the skirt some volume. It was just so long to sew. It just took so long, and this was probably the most time-consuming part of this whole pattern, was stitching like 6 different skirt pieces together. And of course I also did those in all French seams, and it came out good. And then I forgot that I had to sew the zipper in at the end, so I had to rip back open one side as you see me doing, and yeah, just going through, cutting the seam allowances off and flipping it over and sewing it. And there was a lot of just repeated motions and repeated steps. I actually really didn't have to reference the instructions for this pattern at all because it was pretty much self-explanatory. So here I am pinning the bodice to the skirt, and this is one of the things that like makes or breaks dresses. This takes me the longest when I'm making dresses, and I am fearful of this step because if you mess this up, it can really go badly from there. So I'm taking the time to make sure that it's aligned right. And even though you see me going super slow here and checking and everything, I actually had to repin this like 3 different times. And you know, I spared you those clips because who wants to watch that? But it took so long. And then I started the skirt and my bobbin ran out. So, you know, it was a really rough time. And this is where the dress started fighting me in the final steps of the pattern of sewing the bodice to the skirt pieces. And probably the most challenging part of that was then doing the French seam on the inside, making sure that the pleats aligned right. Here I am doing the zipper finally. I am pinning that in, and I just basted the edges together. This pattern actually in the instructions said to sew snaps in, but I hate snaps on the sides of dresses because I feel like they make really weird dimples and gapes in the side of the dress when you're wearing it. So I went with a zipper instead, and I found this pink zipper to match the fabric. It matched really well, and it came out good for the closure on this dress. I actually, you know, prefer zippers pretty much 9 times out of 10 for dresses. And most of the older patterns I have do have you using zippers for the dress closures, but yeah, so I cut out the base stitches and then I started on the hem. I did a nice big wide hem, which is my favorite for mid-century dress patterns. I really think the wide hem helps the skirt to kind of keep its shape and form a little bit better. And then I hand stitched the hem down, and I also stabbed myself with the needle, and here are the results. I think it came out really good. I'm excited to wear this for the summer, or I could wear it with like a long sleeve top under it. And yeah, the skirt is really cute without being one of those like really big full circle skirts that you typically see with 1950s patterns. And that's it, guys. I'll see you in my next one. Bye!